Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Angel Olsen called All Mirrors. You know, it feels like I've been struggling to get on board with Angel Olsen for years now. And what's frustrating is that it always feels like there's just one or two elements that just get in the way of things really coming together. She's a terrific singer, but sometimes she's stuck with production that doesn't flatter her unique timbre or style, and she's got some vocal tics that don't quite work for me. And now the production can often swell with portentous presence and purpose, and then wind up dragging if the climax doesn't come through. She's a strong songwriter, but I often run into quibbles of nuance and framing that just don't pay off as strongly as I would hope. And all this is surrounded by the fact that in the lo-fi, alternative country adjacent scene, she's surrounded by a lot of acts that might not have her unique pipes, but can stick the landing a little bit more strongly across the board. But there were two things that prompted me to check this album out anyway. The first being that in 2017, she teamed up with Alex Cameron for the song Stranger's Kiss, which showed that with a potent groove beneath her and some punchy synthesizers, she could write an absolutely fantastic song. It's easily one of the best of the year, and she helped make it that. And I kept thinking about that song when, for number two, I heard that her newest album, All Mirrors, was not just going to be a pivot towards Baroque pop with these huge, lush strings arrangements, but also an embrace of more synthesizers as well. Which, alright, I didn't quite love how she utilized them on My Woman, but maybe there'd be a little bit more focus and clarity this time around, especially given how much the music press has slung so much critical acclaim at her for this album. Although, given the recent avalanche of critical acclaim at Baroque pop acts spanning from Lana Del Rey to Julia Holter to Wise Blood in the past year, I do take some of that with a grain of salt. But okay, fine, I still really want to like this, so what do we get on All Mirrors? This is incredibly frustrating, because with every single listen I gave All Mirrors, the more I understood exactly why people love it, and why critics are falling all over themselves to praise this as one of the best of the year, for many of the same reasons that Titanic Rising by Wise Blood has gotten so much acclaim in a similar space. And it's not like there aren't some parallels between the two. A huge expansion in sound towards the most opulent Baroque pop production that they've ever had, a lot of weighty elegance that gives you the impression that a lot of grand ideas are being conveyed here. Hell, I might even appreciate Angel Olsen's work a lot more, because it doesn't feel as thematically dissonant in some of the callbacks to that era of overly arranged 60s and 70s easy listening and Baroque pop, with much of the scope of the songwriting kept a little bit more personal and intimate, and really that's a good lane for her. In other words, this is all set up to work so much better for me, and yet I'm still just kind of lukewarm on it. Again, it's far from bad, and I feel like I gotta stress that given because I already see the backlash coming, but I don't think it's great, and it's really just a number of little things that keep it from really clicking for me. In other words, like all the rest of the Angel Olsen albums, it's good, but I can't call it great. And I think we have to start off with the compositions and the production. And I'm going to make an effort to separate the two because this might be the root of some of the dissonance, at least for me. Because given the callback to a lush, elegant era of pop, for as heavily arranged and huge as these songs are produced, you would expect that the recording and the mixing would be top notch, giving every tone a lot of room to breathe and swell and for the harsher moments to really cut through. And John Congleton, great producer, especially with St. Vincent, and albums playing in similar elegant but kind of jagged material like, say, Strange Mercy. And yet it's genuinely jarring where for all the huge strings arrangements and Angel Olsen cutting loose vocally, parts of the mix sound really bricked, with clipping at the very top that cracks that illusion of elegance, especially in comparisons with the more analog past. And while I can see it being excused for a cut like Impasse that's trying to be a little bit more melodramatically dark and might excuse some of the edge, it's still kind of a poor excuse, and the vocal mixing still sounds really muddy. Now, credit John Congleton, producing an album of this scope, especially with Angel Olsen as such a dynamic singer across a big vocal register, that's not easy. But he's actually produced for her before on Burn Your Fire for No Witness. And going back to that review, part of my biggest issues with that album was a lot of slapdash vocal mixing that never really grasped how to properly center her in the mix. and now it's happening again. And when you factor in a lot of breathy echo and sweeping effects around her voice, when you introduce all the glossy waves of synth that were stolen from Beach House for interplay with the strings, like on the title track, it feels like you got another case where Angel Olsen's unique tone and songwriting, which again, I must highlight, it's the best part of any Angel Olsen album, it's fighting for air amidst a mix that's gonna suffocate it. And that's not counting the moments where she opts for a gentler coo that requires a subtlety that this production doesn't even come close to giving her effectively, like on Tonight and Too Easy, especially given how huge everything else in the mix will sound, from the drums to the buzzy synths, or on New Love cassette, a lot of that cello. I mean, it sounds good, the strings sound impressive, but they're too loud opposite everything else. And this is unfortunately not helped by some of Angel Olsen's delivery. I've said before that for as dynamic of a singer as she is with a powerful range, her tendency to bend around words and tones can be a bit of a mixed bag. And that's not counting the points where she can sound a little bit nasal or flat, or interpret a vocal line in a way that doesn't really match the overall mood of the arrangement. Take Tonight, probably one of the more restrained songs on the album that gradually builds that aching string section, and it really does sound beautiful, but Angel Olsen herself doesn't really modulate beyond barely a whisper, and it leaves the song feeling kind of abortive. Arguably my biggest issue with her quivering delivery against a mix that's suffocated in reverb on Endgame as well, even if I do really love the horns that come in near the end. Or take What It Is with its fat pulsating groove against the richer strings. Why is Angel Olsen singing behind a compressed lo-fi filter, and why was there no real change up to drive the song home, or just let her cut through the cymbal fizz that saturates the mix? The cymbals are actually mixed a little bit too high all across this album. Or take the gentle attempt at acoustics on Spring. Why, instead of cultivating a lot of warmth or intimacy, the drums are cranked up so loud and the mixing sounds hemmed in at every turn, and that's before the keyboards just go off key. Now that's not saying that there aren't instrumental moments that work. The opening track Lark has the sort of sizzling but pummeling impact that earns the melodrama. I really like the well-balanced elegance of chants, even if I think the ending is a little bit slight. And while the faster groove and acoustics driving Summer might sound a little bit like a fusion of Lana Del Rey and Lindy Ortega with a little bit too much reverb, it is a song with a driving pulse and one of the few that bothers to have any momentum. That's the other significant issue I have with this album. Not that it's too long, it's under an hour, but it plays a lot longer than it is. Mostly thanks to slow tempos and a significant lack of groove. And when so many of your songs bring such size and scope to the table, especially in the drums and the walls of strings, it falls in a weird gray zone where it doesn't overwhelm the senses like a Swans album, but it's ponderous to the point where you're looking for either the tempo to kick up a notch, or a hook to materialize, or just something to pay it all off. Now normally, this would be where I would point to the content and the songwriting, which again is by far the best part of any Angel Olsen album, and again, I'd say it is here as well, albeit stripping her pretty bare poetry down even further to the most spare and unmoored it's ever felt. It's actually an interesting pivot, and one that Angel Olsen has done intentionally in order to break away from the projections of her audience upon her, which is why we get a song like Impasse, where she sarcastically blows through everyone who has projected their emotions upon her and think that they know her better than herself. It's probably the angriest she gets on this project, and even if it kinda reads like those Lana Del Rey tweets blasting Ann Powers for the NPR piece, in the context of the searching nature of the album, it kinda makes sense. Lark sets the scene by blowing apart an emotionally abusive relationship with a guy who is self-obsessed and is unloading all of his demons onto her, later reflected on Tonight and all of its projection on her. And from there, the album's arc is to buck against those projections as she tries to find the core of her own identity, and finds it, although open to the expectation of changes across time, like the homespun musings of Spring, seeing a lot of her friends settle down, take different paths in their lives while not changing personally, or the weary acceptance of hard times in the past on Summer. This actually translates a weakness that I noted on My Woman into a real strength here, where it felt like she was being led by all her passions before, it now tempers her hand grabbing hold the wheel, where What It Is reflects upon going through the motions of being in love, trying to convince yourself, and thinking that you get it without ever really finding that true feeling. And Endgame becomes a frank acknowledgement that it wasn't the loss of love and passion that really stung her, but other needs in the relationship that were just not being met. And while cuts like Too Easy and New Love cassette, they do feel a little slight, I actually like how the album ends on Chance. because at this point she can't contextualize whatever love forever is gonna look or feel like, especially given how she's had that before and it's fallen by the wayside. She's been burned. So she's looking for what things can be right now that's wholehearted and honest. It's a beautiful, simple little moment where you can tell that she wishes she wasn't so jaded, and she wishes all expectations of time and space to be thrown away. Maybe that space is what gives her the chance now. It's genuinely striking, and yet it ties into my big frustration with All Mirrors. I think the album's really well written. It still contains the emotional nuance that Angel Olsen has always had, and if you don't care for production quibbles, you're just looking for the album to wash over you, I can see this winning over a lot of people and a lot of critics. But unfortunately for me, it highlights a series of compositions where the big swings of theatricality get in the way of the writing, especially when there are notable flaws in that production design that just don't flatter her and don't center her. Apparently, Angel Olsen also recorded this album in a much more stripped-back, acoustic-leaning mix, more reminiscent of the solitary writing sessions that she had making this album, and honestly, I genuinely want to hear it. I think a fair few of these songs will play better in a more acoustic atmosphere, a little bit more intimate. Although, ideally, a well-mixed composite with songs from both versions would probably be the best of both worlds for All Mirrors. But as it is, I'm sorry folks, I'm giving this a very strong 6 out of 10 and a recommendation, but I do not think this is the best version of this album. Again, I've had a very mixed record when it's come to Baroque pop this year and Angel Olsen's career as a whole, so take all of it with a grain of salt, but otherwise, you know what? Angel Olsen's on her own path now. Who am I to tell her otherwise? So if you're curious, check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I imagine this review is going to be annoying to some of you, that you guys are going to wish that I liked this more. Believe me, I wish I liked it more too. But if you want to buy or stream it, links down there below, and I got the poll up there if you all tell me how wrong I am. Looking forward to it. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And hey, if you're looking for the newest episode of Billboard Breakdown, or maybe some other reviews, links in the card right over there. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.